Now we don't have no. If I go wrong. Boleh tu.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Plus 5 seconds.
Lift off normal. P1 tracking.
R2 tracking.
P2 tracking. First stage performance normal. P4 tracking. L1 stage ignited.
Plus 2 minutes.
L1 stage performance normal. 200 stages are separated. Closed loop guidance initiated.
Good evening to all the viewers who was live on this platform. It's a very important day, the eve of moon landing, and hopefully one successful moon mission of India, of ISRO moon Mission Chandrayaan 3. Just some few, almost a day is awaiting to us, almost 23 hours or 24 hours, because according to the latest update of ISRO, at 6 p.m. around 6 hour 4 minute p.m. it will be on Chandrayaan 3's Vikram lander will be on the surface of moon, and then after some period of time to avoid the sandstorm which may occur due to the soft landing of Vikram on the atmosphere of Moon, on the surface of Moon. When it will go over, then the slider will be came down, and according with this through this slider, the Pragyan rover will come down to on the earth of on the surface of Moon to rove for its roving, and also with its roving, the national emblem of India, along with the logo of ISRO, will be marked on the sandy surface of Moon. So it will be a great thing, and great thing will be happening tomorrow. But the last critical time has already been started, and last 15 to 17 minutes it is the golden moment when Vikram lander automatically, with its own sensors, information analyzing system, and using the utmost gravity of Moon, it will softly land on Moon surface. Today, we will be blessed with the presence of one more renowned scientist, science communicator, astrophysicist, who worked at IUCAA also, and who have very much keen interest in astrophysics and this type of space science, will deliver a great lecture on the final touchdown, about the final touchdown of Chandrayaan 3, and elaborately detailed about the actions and how the Chandrayaan 3 lander Vikram rover Pragyan will come land on and rove on Moon surface. So we are awaiting for her. Within few moments, she may join us, and elaborately she will discuss about these things. By this time, we are enjoying one thing, that is the Chandrayaan landing tracker, which is needful to understand also. So we are just sharing the screen with this thing for your better understanding. So this is the tracker of Chandrayaan 3 mission. Previously, we have with us Lunar 25 from Roscosmos also, but somehow it's a bad luck for science and scientific temperament that due to some technical issues, signaling issues, Chandrayaan 3 remained on its trajectory, but Lunar 25 missed all this and malfunctioned due to some errors, and it's crashed on Moon surface. So according to the Chandrayaan 3 mission, the landing burn will held on. There is a time 23 hours 19 minutes and 12 seconds, and it is continuously in negative, and touchdown will happen by 23 hours 39 minutes, almost 40 minutes, 38 minutes, and this mission already taken as a whole 39 days, 3 hours, 52 minutes. And it is expected that according to the update of 19th August, 4:23 p.m. ET, the status is final landing preparation underway. Chandrayaan 3's landing module is currently in a 25 kilometer into 134 kilometer orbit, which is we hope that if we are on the moon, we can see the Chandrayaan 3 or lander Vikram on the sky of moon. And the landing module is undergoing internal checks and working to determine its designated landing site. It is searching the landing site. Powered descent is expected to commence on August 23rd, 2023 around 17:45 IST. Lunar first site captured on August 19th by Chandrayaan 3 lander hazard detection and avoidance camera LHDC. This camera is now on process, and it's capturing the moon surface where unhazardfully and avoiding all the disturbance, how properly it can land on moon. So according to the stats, this is the thing, and road to already it has done its journey is almost 1,77,077. So this is the overall picture. And now we are waiting for Madam. Anytime Madam will join us. And Madam already joined us. It's our great privilege that today our discussion and then final discussion, I think tomorrow we have to join the ISRO site for landing to what is happening with Vikram, whether it is landing successfully, whether our scientist journey makes all these things perfect. So before that, on the eve of this landing process of Chandrayaan 3, Vikram and Pragyan, we have with us most pioneer scientist, astrophysicist and assistant professor who worked with IUCAA even, and now serving with Maulana Azad Urdu University. So without taking any extra time, I think we have to directly go to Madam for a great learning, for a great listening. So please bless us with your words and wisdom, Madam. Over to Priya Hasan, Madam.
Thank you, Anjan sir. Thank you for calling me once again. I will just one minute. I'll just share my screen. Just a minute. I'll do entire screen.
Yes, Madam.
Yeah.
This picture has already came.
Sir, are you playing some music on the background?
Yeah. I am stopping that one, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Start.
Yeah. So thank you, Anjan sir. Thank you for having me over again. And thank you for giving me a chance to talk about something that we are all so very excited about today, uh, because the big day is tomorrow, where we'll see the final countdown for Chandrayaan 3. So today I'd briefly talk to you about what is Chandrayaan 3, what is all the excitement about, and why are we also, thrilled about this whole thing. So I will cover a few aspects about Chandrayaan 3, some of it which you can see the launch, most of you all are aware of. This is the lander, which is Vikram. And then what is also very important is the technique that ISRO employs to actually launch such satellites, right? So, like I said, this is a brief this thing about Chandrayaan. So, Chandrayaan 3 is the third moon mission that ISRO is doing to the moon. We had Chandrayaan 1, 2, and 3. Now, Chandrayaan 1, we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail, but one of the biggest contributions of Chandrayaan 1 was that it discovered water on the moon. And that has actually led to a whole big, a new set of discovery on the moon. And we'll talk about these things in a short while. This is the launch vehicle of ISRO. This is the technique, and we'll get onto this in a minute. Yeah. So, most of you all are aware of the space race which existed as part of the Cold War, right? So, you all know when the Cold War, this was in the in the 40s, in the 50s, and this is when basically you had the Cold War between Russia and America, right? Where they had a constant twist between them as to who was actually going to make it to space. And while the Russians actually sent the first man in space, they also sent the first woman in space. You had finally, in return to that, you had America, which actually, so the Russians actually launched Sputnik, which was the first artificial satellite in 1957. And then within a short while, you had there was the Apollo program going on by America, which was a very big program on actually sending man to the moon, because that is what America thought was their response to it. And finally, they did manage to send the man to the moon in 1969. And but then what happened is, unfortunately, as part of the Apollo program, there were six crewed missions, which actually sent 12 astronauts. In each mission, you had two going. So there were 12 astronauts which were sent. And this continued till 1972. Okay. This was the crew of Apollo 17. And after that, everybody kind of lost interest in the moon. It was as though they did not need to go back to the moon, and they just stopped it all. Right. And so this is the Apollo story. Apollo was a big success for the US because they actually got Neil Armstrong on the moon with Buzz Aldrin, and everybody knows the story very well. So and you had Michael Collins, who actually sat in the module while these and got these people back home. So this was the end of the space race at that time, when you had these things happening. Now there were different kinds of moon missions which one can do. These were the ones where you actually had lander. You could have flybys, or this is not only for the moon. This can apply to any kind of planetary or any kind of space mission. So you can have a flyby. For example, you go close to some object and you fly by it, and you actually get images and things like that. So there were examples of this done by the US as well as USSR. You could have orbiters which go to for example, to Mars, to Venus, to Jupiter, etc. There have been various missions done by the Europeans, by the Americans, by the Russians, by the Indians, etc. These are orbiter missions. For example, even our Mangalyaan. You could also have missions which are called impact missions, where you basically throw something, right, to impact the surface. And while it's throwing it, you actually use that to study this surface. So Chandrayaan 1, that's exactly what it did. It actually did a impact onto the moon. It threw the probe moon, right? You could also have landers. That means you land something on the surface. You could have rovers, and then you could have human missions, right? These are the different kinds of space missions. Like I mentioned, this is not just for the moon. This would apply to any kind of space missions, right? And all these of them, like I mentioned it in this thing, they all have their own importance, right? It's not Like I said, the impact missions can also be important depending upon the purpose they are meant for. So if you actually see after the end of the first this thing, if you look at the scores for the moon, how well have different countries tried to actually explore the moon? So you see the United States, they actually managed the ultimate. They actually managed the ultimate in the sense they managed everything. Uh, you had they managed a flyby, they managed an orbit, impactor, lander, rover, return, as well as crewed landing, right? So this was managed by the Americans. The Soviet Union also managed everything, excluding a crewed landing. They had all their lunar missions, which lunar means the moon in Russian, but they did not have a crewed landing onto the moon. China has been also very successful in their space program. They have even gone to the far side of the moon, right? Which was a part of the moon which nobody ever attempted it, excluding the Chinese. And they have even managed that, but they have not yet done a crewed landing. India has till now done a flyby orbit impact, but we've been unsuccessful. The red ones or the pink ones, which you can see, are unsuccessful missions. We did not manage landing and roving, just like Japan. This is the UAE. They also failed in their rover mission. Israel recently had a mission, and even that failed with the Russian mission for the landing, right? So, various countries you can see have attempted flybys, orbits, etc., various things to the moon. But obviously, there's still so much more to explore at the moon because there's so much more to do. Now, around this time, like I said, after 1972, that was the last man which went on the moon. After that, there were no moon missions. But suddenly now, there has been a renewed interest in the moon, right? And in new space race. So, for example, the Americans, after the Apollo missions, they launched a new program called the Artemis program, which is a follow up of the Apollo program, which was the original one which sent Neil Armstrong. And that was like 50 years ago. And now they have renewed the thing with the Artemis program. The Russians also renewed their lunar program. And therefore, you see, after 1976, Luna 25 was the next Russian mission that was sent to the moon after a gap of almost 50 years. China has been, like I told you, they have the Chang 4, which has been operated since landed there. The Israelis, I just mentioned that earlier, there was a launch to the moon in 2019, but it crash landed. The Japanese are planning SLIM, and India's joined this thing. But what was interesting now in this new space race is that no country had ever landed on the moon's south pole before. And although the US and China have landed softly on the moon surface, but no country had gone to the South Pole. Now, in principle, the moon is not too far. The moon is about 400,000 kilometers. That is actually the backyard. In terms of astronomy, it's just our backyard, it's nothing very far away. So, why did this renewed interest come up in the moon? So, first of all, like I mentioned to you, the Apollo programs, there were six missions, six crewed missions, which had two men in each of them. So, totally only 12 humans have walked to the moon. And all these humans have been male, American males, okay, which were sent in there. There were 15 uncrewed missions. But of the ones who went in the crewed missions, you can see that there are barely about four of them who are still alive, who are already in their 80s, and two of them who are in their 90s. So the rest are all young astronauts. So the rest are all young astronauts. And far more it would be far more important or useful to actually do space missions from the moon. The other very important factor is that since water was discovered on the moon, right, it was realized that the water on the moon could actually be used as part of these missions, as well as since there's hydroxyl available on the moon, it could be actually be used as rocket fuel, and it can be used for all these other missions. The other important factor is that you could actually have research stations. It's actually for like on the moon. For example, if you have telescopes on the moon, That could actually work very well because the moon has a very thin atmosphere. So you would not have any disturbance in your seeing, in looking at the sky. And therefore, there are actually serious plans of telescopes onto the moon and the research stations. It's interesting that our exploration of the moon is very similar to our exploration of Antarctica, for example. So initially, people wanted to go to Antarctica, but once they went there, again there was a lull of 50 years when they had renewed interest, and then they went back to Antarctica, and now they have set up proper stations. There are telescopes over there, and there are various things important over there. So similarly, this is following a similar trend where now what we are looking for is further exploration of the moon for these various purposes. And like I said, since Chandrayaan 1 started the story of actually discovering water on the moon, specifically on the poles, we therefore had this interest on the poles. Yeah. So that comes to the next point, which is the important point, is what is the importance of landing near the South Pole, right? Now, I'll actually show it to you that if you see that all the earlier programs which were landing on the moon were all around the equatorial region, because the equatorial region of the moon is far more smoother. So landing something on that part of the moon would be very simple, right? Far more simpler. The South Pole is far more cratered. There are many more, it's a much more rougher surface to be landing on. But the South Pole actually seems far more interesting because sunlight in the certain regions of the polar these things, because you have very deep craters, deeper than Mount Everest over there, they actually reach temperatures which are, about minus 230 degrees centigrade. And therefore, on these regions where there've been total darkness, there's actually regions which are which belong to the period of the early solar system, and therefore in these regions, everything is kind of preserved. These are like fossil records of the early solar system, and therefore they could be very important for space exploration. The other important thing is, like I told you earlier, with Chandrayaan 1, they actually found water, hydroxyl, and many more important, interesting molecules, which could be used either as rocket fuel or they could be used as other purpose. And therefore, people realize that it's very important that we land near the South Pole and explore that region. But like I mentioned earlier, the South Pole is a very difficult region to land in because it is not as well illuminated as the equatorial region, as well as there are lots of craters over there, and hence it's this thing. Now let's, after talking about the global story, let's come to the Indian space program. What is the role that the Indian space program has been playing in the exploration of the moon? So we first of all start off with the surface probe which we had, which is called Chandrayaan 1. Chandrayaan 1 was launched in 2008, and its mission was to basically have an orbiter. I have mentioned to you earlier what are the different kinds of mission. So it's an orbiter and an impactor, right? Because at this stage, people said landing on the moon is not going to be easy. And therefore, what happened is they had what was called a hard impact. You actually threw a thing, but the impact was sent to the South Pole region. And that impactor itself, within it had spectrometers and various instruments so that it could land there and then take certain measurements, certain readings, which it could then broadcast and send back, relay it back to the Earth so that it could actually be used. And that's what actually happened, that this moon impact probe, which actually struck the South Pole in a controlled manner near the crater Shackleton, it actually did the analysis, and like I said, they are the ones who actually get the credit of discovering water on the moon, though it was actually stated by the Apollo astronauts, but this was concrete evidence of it. And along with that, Chandrayaan 1 also had, along with the 5 ISRO payloads, they also had 6 payloads from other agencies, like, for example, NASA of the US or the European Space Agency, ESA, as well as the Bulgarian Aerospace Agency. So, like I said, that though this was just an impactor probe, but it kind of triggered the whole story. Number one of the South Pole, and number two of water being there on the pole. But the problem was with Chandrayaan 1, there were some technical issues. It was supposed to last much more longer. There was problem with the thermal shielding, and therefore it worked for some time, but it did not work for the long 3 year period that it was actually planned for. It worked for a shorter period, but still the results of Chandrayaan 1 are important. And like I mentioned, the most important finding was the discovery of water using their mineralogy mapper. This was the instrument which they had, okay, which basically using the infrared reflectance, which actually measure the water on the moon. Now, the next mission, which ISRO planned after Chandrayaan 1, was Chandrayaan 2. But this was a mission which was slightly different in the sense this was to have an orbiter, but along with that, also have a lander called Vikram and a rover called Pragyan. And this was sent in 2019. And another very important thing which we need to remember for ISRO is that ISRO runs on a very tight budget. So if you actually see the because of the tight budget, you can see that the mission only cost about $143 million, right? Which is in space. This thing it's considered a very low budget. This thing, and this was and half more than one third the cost was the cost of the launch vehicle. Now in space programs a very important factor is the launch vehicle, because as you know that when you're launching something you basically have to escape the gravitational force of the earth, so you have to reach the escape velocity so that the thing can actually launch. And uh, and therefore I've just jumped this a little bit. So what ISRO does is that ISRO basically its launch vehicles are meant for low Earth object satellites, which are within 500 kilometers. If you want to launch a satellite to go all the way to the moon, which is almost 400,000 kilometers, then what ISRO does is that they do it in using what is called a slingshot mechanism. So what you do is you basically launch the thing, you get an elliptical orbit, which is the parking orbit, and then what is done is that you give it various boosts. So you do various boosts to the parking orbit so that you increase the ellipticity. And then finally, you give it a boost with which it can escape from the gravitational force of the Earth and go straight to the moon. So I think I showed that to you earlier. I will just show that to you once again. Here you can see this, that if you want to go to the moon you have to launch, you go to a first, this is called a parking orbit, and then you do boosters at very fixed times so that you go into higher ellipticity orbit, then you go to the third orbit, the fourth orbit, the fifth orbit, and then by the time of the sixth orbit you have enough of a momentum which you get from the gravitational force of the earth to actually go straight to the moon. And then once it reaches the moon, it should be captured by the moon. It first starts off with this outer orbit and gradually it does what is called deboosting. It does deboosting and comes closer to the lunar surface, and then it comes like this, right? So this is the technique or the slingshot technique which is used by ISRO when you want to launch something to the moon. Or for example, it's exactly the same thing which was used in the Mangalyaan mission, or for example, in the future missions which we plan in planetary orbits. Because in this case, we do not have, we don't have a launch vehicle which can actually go straight. So that is how ISRO actually manages to work on its tight budget, because we are not spending that much on our launch vehicle. In the American case or the Russian case, their launch vehicles are far more powerful. So, for example, even the Apollo rockets, when the Apollo rockets were launched, they just took 4 days to reach the moon, because they would launch and straight away reach the moon, right? But in our case, since our launch vehicle is not so powerful, we therefore need to do this, different slingshot technique with which we launch. But like I said, this technique works very well, and ISRO has been doing it for a very long time. They've done it with the Chandrayaan missions, they've done it with the Mangalyaan missions, and in that way, ISRO can actually continue its work in a low budget. But obviously, we must give credit in this case to the mathematics, the orbital mechanics, the theoretical groups in ISRO, because they are the ones who have to do these calculations, right? It's very important to know with your calculations as when is it that you can actually escape from the gravitational force, and then when the satellite escapes, it should actually reach the moon and get captured by the moon. If it goes in an orbit which does not come close enough to the moon, then you'll actually lose the satellite, right? And therefore, this requires very careful calculations for you to know exactly how to launch so that you can, meet the moon at the right point. So that's a very important aspect of ISRO, of how ISRO works with its low budget. So, like I mentioned, Chandrayaan 2 had its orbiter, it had the lander which was called Vikram, and it had the rover which was called Pragyan, right? So, you had an 88 million budget for the orbiter lander rover and a 52 million budget for this thing. And it was something which was planned as the first soft landing on the moon done by India. and everybody was very, very excited about it. This was also the soft landing near the South Pole. But like I told you, the South Pole is a very difficult region to land in. And you have to understand that soft landing is a very tricky thing, because the problem is you are the orbiter, you know, the lander, it actually has to, you know, come out of the orbiter. And then when you have this landing taking place, the lander actually has a very large speed. It has a very, very large velocity. It could be something like even 6,000 kilometers per hour. Okay. And then just imagine, with that kind of a velocity, if you are going to throw a lander onto the surface of the moon, which you know is anyway rugged, right? There are lots of craters. You know, the moon has no atmosphere, and because it does not have an atmosphere, very thin atmosphere, there is nothing that stops the lander when it's falling, right? So, for example, if you are landing on the Earth, you can have a parachute and you can ensure that your landing is smooth and slow. But you cannot have a parachute like this on the moon's surface, because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, so you can't stop it in any way, right? And therefore, this soft landing, which was to be done by Vikram, was a very tricky business, very difficult business, and it actually was unsuccessful, right? So you all know that in 2019, when the landing took place, at the last minute, communication was lost with the lander. The lander was, it was doing its thing, and then suddenly at the last minute, it actually kind of disconnected, due to which it landed on a hard surface, which was later on imaged, and it was actually found that the thing crashed and the whole thing failed, right? But the orbiter had various payloads, Indian payloads, 5 payloads from India, 3 from Europe, 2 from the US, 1 from Bulgaria. And the orbiter was still a successful mission. And actually, that has been the mission, the basis for this new mission, which is the Chandrayaan 3 mission. And that's because the orbiter was basically scanning the lunar surface, right? So the orbiter has been scanning the lunar surface since 2019, okay, which is 4 years. So since 4 years, the orbiter has this thing, and it has actually it has a very good resolution. It has a resolution of about 25 centimeters. So to a very large accuracy, it has totally studied the lunar surface, right? So though one would think of Chandrayaan 2 as a failed mission, I would say it's definitely not the failed mission, because the orbiter of Chandrayaan 2 has fed in all the data which has been required for Chandrayaan 3. I'll explain to you. Basically, in studying the surface, right? The orbiter also once again studied the water on the surface, and like I said, it has been mapping the surface. So it maps the surface not just in the terms of the craters and all that on it, it also maps the surface in the terms of what are the chemicals present onto the lunar surface, as well as in 3D, what is the topography, right? What are the craters, what are the mountains, whatever's the Murray on the moon, etc. It has mapped it to an excellent accuracy. So I would say that it is definitely not an unsuccessful thing. It has mapped it very well, and it's given us. So, so that's the Chandrayaan 2 story. And then enters in this. So, like I said, still Chandrayaan 2 is still a very special mission, because it was the first mission which was attempting a soft landing on the South Pole. It's the first one to actually explore lunar territory with Indian technology, as well as it's the fourth country to, if it was successful, it would have been the fourth thing to soft land. So till now, the Russians, the Americans, and the Chinese, they're the only 3 countries which have managed to land on the moon surface, right? And India would be the fourth. If you see it, I like to show this slide because I like to show a lot of people, many of the viewers, or many people anyway, think about what about the cost that we are paying on our program, right? Is it worth it? Can we actually spend so much money on a space program? And I would like to actually bring to your notice that when we are spending on our space program, you can actually compare the budget with the kind of budget which we spend on other things, right? So, for example, here I've given you an example of national monuments. You can see that the Chandrayaan 2 mission, it actually is almost 3 times cheaper than the Statue of Unity, and even much more cheaper than the Shivaji statue, which is being planned. And definitely, these ones are playing a more important role in that sense. And therefore, um, I would say that in terms of the budget of the country, it's just spending a very small part of the budget of the country. But the kind of returns we are getting it from it, in the sense of the kind of technology we are learning, the kind of things we are doing with it, they are far more important, right? And therefore, I would still like to press the case about why is it so important for us to actually have a space program, and why the space program is so very important in our in our in the development of the country, right? Because in terms of the budget, it's definitely not spending so much money, right? Now we come on to, then comes the entry of the Chandrayaan 3 mission. Now, the Chandrayaan 3, like I told you, is a follow up of the Chandrayaan 2. It's in principle doing what Chandrayaan 2 could not do, in the sense of a safe landing and roving on the lunar surface. So, Chandrayaan 2 does not have an orbiter, for the simple reason that Chandrayaan 3 doesn't have one, because Chandrayaan 2 orbiter is still over there, right? And therefore, it actually just has a lander and a rover, and there's what is called a propulsion module. Okay, the propulsion module is the one which carries the lander and the rover till it is in the orbit, and it's actually, it will do spectropolarimeter of the Earth, and it will study various things about it while it is in the orbit. Now, the lander has various payloads on it. It has something called CHAST, which is Chandra's Surface Thermophysical Experiment. And just a minute, huh? One, just a minute. I'll just. Hello? Another one called the Langmuir probe to estimate plasma density and variations, as well as a laser, this thing. Okay. And the rover is actually the one which is actually, uh, yeah, yeah. The rover is the one which actually has a spectrometer, a spectroscope, and that will be basically for deriving the elemental composition of the vicinity, the landing site. It's basically going to dig around over there and actually get the stuff over there, right? So that's the basic mission and the purpose of the mission. The idea is basically to make a good study of the South Pole, to study the water, the minerals, etc., available over there, which can be used for future lunar exploration, right? So it is thought that a lot of these things can be used as rocket fuel and this thing. So let us once again just recap. You have Chandrayaan 2. Like I mentioned, you had these various things. Uh, but the Chandrayaan 3 mission is the sequel to it, which actually, again, the same name we have for the lander and the rover. They were called Vikram Pragyan in Chandrayaan 2, and they're called exactly the same things on Chandrayaan 3. And this landing site is near the South Pole. So in that way, it's just a continuation of that. Now, I mentioned this earlier to you that since ISRO does not have uh, it does not have such a powerful launch vehicle. Therefore, when it launches, what it does is it actually launches with slingshot. So you have these 5 orbits, and you basically at the 6th orbit you go towards the moon will capture it. Then you have what is called, so you switch orbits, and then the moon deboosts. Here you have, boosters which will actually slow down. You have to slow down the thing, so you slow down till you come to lower and lower orbits, right? And you must have been tracking what has been done. So what actually happened on Sunday, on the 20th, was that it finally went on to this orbit. So this is an orbit which is at the orbit at present which Chandrayaan is. It's at a perigee of 30 kilometers and an apogee of 100 kilometers. So it's an elliptical orbit, like I said, this thing. So you are actually getting it onto this orbit, which is like that, right? And so gradually you're coming closer onto this thing. And like I mentioned earlier, this requires very careful calculations to ensure that your thing is close enough and you can when the satellite goes here, it should get captured by the moon and go like this. So, like I said, it requires very careful calculations. Once again, let's talk about the money spent on Chandrayaan 3. The Chandrayaan 3 mission has costed 615 crore rupees. But if you compare it, for example, with some of the popular Hollywood movies, you can see it's far cheaper than any of these other Hollywood movies. And therefore, if you were again to see the kind of budget, the budget is definitely not much. So let us see what's going to happen tomorrow. So tomorrow, like I told you, you see this. This is the thing which has been going on for the past 42 days. So if you actually see over here, um, we had August 9th, we had July 6th when you scheduled the launch. It was launched on 14th July. You had these various maneuvers which took place, which were those ones which actually got it onto the lunar orbit. And finally, you go into this orbit raising maneuver, the translunar ejection. And then you had by August 1st, the spacecraft was in a translunar orbit. Okay. This was at a distance of 288 kilometers to this, right? And then you got it into the orbit on August 6th. And then you can see I showed you in the diagram, you had these various orbits where it, debooster orbits with which it went closer and closer to the moon, right? So you had it on the August 14th, it went to 151 to 171. You have on 16th 153 to 163. On 17th you come closer, and on 19th you were this. And the second day boosting, which actually happened on August 20th, on that day you went to 100 to 30 kilometers. So apogee was 100 kilometers and perigee was 30 kilometers. Now, obviously, the soft landing would be a monumental event for ISRO, because it would be, along with it, one thing is the work of ISRO, but along with that, there's also a lot of hope and expectations from the Indians, the young Indians, the old Indians. And India has already made a mark in their space program, showing that there are only 5 countries which actually have an active space program, of which India is one. And it is expected and hoped that if we are successful in it, it would actually be helpful in keeping the scientific temper in the country. We know that that's very, very important. We need to actually have a good scientific temper, and the success of the space program is something which will definitely which will inspire the youth of our country, as well as the scientific community in the country. So that's very important. And there are various, if you want to see the live updates when you see it tomorrow, you can see that there's the ISRO site, which is going to be doing it. So now all the planning has been done. And ideally tomorrow evening at 6:04 p.m., that's the point at which they're expecting the landing to be done, right? I forgot to mention a thing, that the life of Chandrayaan 3 is only going to be 14 days, which is in principle one moon day, right? The phases of the moon, 28 days. So what happens is after 14 days, the satellite will be without any sunlight, and that's when it will not be able to function. The Russians, they actually had on Luna 25, they had some radioactive material with which they could actually still continue functioning even without the sun. But in Chandrayaan 3, we do not have any such thing, and therefore it's going to last only for 14 days, which is, like I said, a moon day, right? So this is what we're expecting tomorrow. Now, let us actually look at the map of the moon to see where exactly. If you remember, I mentioned this to you earlier, that all the Apollo missions were along the equatorial region of the moon. The Russian ones were slightly off, but still, if you see, they all basically stuck to the equatorial region, because that is the region which has maximum illumination, right? And that is the region which has minimum craters, right? So these were all the regions which were done. While you can see Chandrayaan is totally away from this region, we are doing this. The other very interesting part of the moon is the far side of the moon, which we never see, right? You know that the rotation and the revolution period of the moon is exactly the same, due to which we never see the far side of the moon. So the Chinese, they're the only country which actually sent a mission in 2019, the Chang 4, which actually went to the far side of the moon. And it's still there. And that's quite a commendable thing, because otherwise, most other countries were kind of scared to send it to the far side of the moon because, even communication with the Earth is very, very difficult because your far side of the moon is not going to face the Earth, right? So you need to have another intercepting thing which can then convey the messages to the Earth. So the far side, China has already got the credit of actually exploring the far side, but the South Pole, uh, hopefully, can be ours. So the Tycho crater, you can see this image over here. This is the Tycho crater. You can see it over here also. This is something which is very easily observable. On a good night, you can actually even see it on the moon. It's quite easily observable. And this is actually east and south of Tycho. So the exact coordinates of the lighting site is about 32 degrees east, 69, almost 70 degrees south. So it comes somewhere over here. This would be the thing. And you'll see the longitudes from this side, right? So this is our approximate position for the landing. In the meantime, yeah, so we will actually look at these things tomorrow when you actually observe this. I hope you all sit and watch the live stream. You'll see that the descent, like I told you, at present it's on an orbit which has an apogee of 30 kilometers, a perigee of 100. So we are going to work from the 30 kilometers apogee. And when it reaches that point, this is close to 6 o'clock in the evening tomorrow, it's then going to be descended to a lower orbit. So from 30 kilometers, it will then move towards an orbit. So basically, what happens is you have those propulsion things, right? But we have to reverse propel. We are trying to, because, by the lunar gravitational force, the thing will be falling downwards. But we have to do it the other way so that we reduce the velocity. So at 100 kilometers, the velocity is almost about 1.48 kilometers per second, right? But so it will go downwards, reach a height of about 7.4 kilometers. Okay, and basically this means we'll be reducing the speed. At 30 kilometers, it will have a speed of 6,000 kilometers per hour. We are going to slow it down to a speed of 1,200 kilometers per hour, and it will then come at a distance of 7.4 kilometers from the moon, right? So basically, like I said, you're reverse boosting, you're slowing down this thing so that it comes down slower. We basically want to reduce the velocities. So you come to 7.4 kilometers. Then from 7.4, the say stage 2 will be you go from 7.4 to 6.8 kilometers. Okay. And at the same time, they need to tilt. They need to slightly change the inclination, right? Uh, and the important thing at the 6.8 kilometers distance is it needs to actually take the decision of landing at the desired location, basically using facial recognition, okay, of opening a phone. So actually, even Chandrayaan 2 used machine learning, artificial intelligence. Similarly, in this case, what has been happened is that with the orbiter data of Chandrayaan 2, they have mapped the surface very well, and they have actually fixed, certain regions, 24 different regions, which are good landing sites, right? And what it's basically going to do is it's going to match it to those images which are already loaded onto it to actually identify the nice site for landing. So what was done is with the Chandrayaan 2 data, a very detailed study was made of this whole region to check on for the craters, etc., and look for a good region. Now it's going to match it and then use that to find the desirable spot. Okay. Once it finds the desirable spot from 6.8 kilometers, it's going to come down to a height of about 800 meters and then 150 meters. And at 150 meters height, it will suspend itself in the moon's gravity without any motion. Okay. And then once it at 150 meters, you then have, it's almost then going to be like a free fall, right? It is called the vertical descent. And so at stage 6, it's going to be doing this vertical descent, which it comes down to this location, right? But at the same time, it's going to use its camera to register the speed of approach and also look for the these things. And it's actually going to look for regions, okay? And by stage 7, hopefully it should land onto the surface. And then after it lands on the surface, at that time there's going to be no motion. But after 3 hours of being there, when the dust settles and all that, That's when the rover will come out from the thing and it will continue its work, right? Now, this thing, like I said, this is a set of maneuvers which are kind of complicated. Things can go wrong, and that's why people are worried about it, because these things have to happen, with a certain accuracy, right? And the biggest this thing which happened recently was the Russians were also doing a soft landing at the southern this thing, and this was the Luna 25 mission, which was launched on August 11th. And unfortunately, this was the first mission after 50 years, right? And almost 50, the last one was in 1976, and unfortunately, this mission was cancelled because the and we do hope that ISRO has, we've learned from our mistakes, and hopefully this time things should go fine. So these are the words of the ISRO chairman, Somnath, where he said that if everything fails, if all the sensors fails, nothing works, still Vikram will make a landing. This is how it's been designed, provided that the propulsion system works well. We've also made sure that two of the engines in Vikram don't work. It work this time also. It will still be able to land. So ISRO is confident that in spite of whatever things can go wrong, in this case, hopefully nothing should go wrong and everything should go fine. So, like I mentioned, this landing is expected tomorrow at 6 p.m. And at present, it's at this orbit of 100 into 30 kilometers with this velocity, 1.68 kilometers per second. And I showed you all the stages. It's going to come down. We're using the reverse thrusters, lowering down its velocity, and then we'll have this. So let's hope all this works out well. And there's another thing that everything at present is going fine. But ISRO also has a plan B in place that in case it realizes that there's some technical glitch tomorrow, right? Then the next window is on the 27th of August. But at that time, the landing site is going to be about 400 kilometers away from this thing. So that we'll only know about 2 hours before, like by tomorrow afternoon. In case there's a technical glitch, then they may shift it to 27th August. But if not, then as per the plan, it should happen tomorrow. So let's see. There's a Chandrayaan 4 also being planned. So this is not all. ISRO has anyway planned a Chandrayaan 4, which is in collaboration with the Japanese Space Agency, again, which would send a rover and a lander to do the South Pole. This should be sometime in 2026 or maybe later on that. And our exploration of the moon will anyway continue. We look forward to what will happen tomorrow. But like I said, that's not the end of the story. We do have a Chandrayaan 4 in place. And just to keep you informed, I'll just talk a little bit about the other missions of ISRO. There is the AstroSat mission, which is a mission which basically has only telescopes on it. It's an astronomy based satellite, which is just for multi wavelength astronomy. And it has been operational since 2015. It has it basically has three X ray telescopes, and there is an ultraviolet telescope and a sky monitor, which are all there onto AstroSat. These are the different instruments. These are all very much operational, and astronomers in India are using it. It was launched in 2015, and this thing, I won't go into details, but these are the instruments which are on that. What about the plans for the future? Like I said, we have Gaganyaan, we have Shukrayaan, Mangalyaan, and what's going to happen very soon, which is next month, we have a mission which is specifically to the sun, which is called the Aditya mission, which is being sent to a point which is called the L1 point, which is 1.5 million kilometers away from the Earth. And this is just going to 24/7 monitor the sun. So Aditya mission will happen most probably by next month, but very, very soon, because it's totally ready. It's ready for launch, and everything is in place. We are going to have a Mangalyaan mission, which will hopefully happen next year in 2024. And then there's the Gaganyaan mission also of sending 3 persons to space, hopefully of which one would be a woman, right? So I'll end with this, saying that exploration is in our nature. We began as wanderers, we are wanderers still. And these are the words of Carl Sagan. We've lingered long enough to shores of the cosmic ocean. We are ready at last to set sail for the stars. So let's hope that our interesting journey of exploring our universe will continue, and we all look forward to the Chandrayaan 3 tomorrow, and do hope that that would be our interesting thing. So I'll stop sharing, and I'd be happy to take some questions. I can't hear you, Anjan sir. Yeah.
Ma'am, it's a great listening and learning from your side. Thanks to your presence and for a great lecture on very special moment when everybody wants to understand the last this golden hours, what ISRO will do and how it will be possible for Indians also to land on Moon and Mars, Moon especially the South Pole. Ma'am, if you pardon, some questions is there. I would like to share with you, ma'am. They want answers from your side.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. I specifically kept time for that.
Uh,
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, first of all, one from Delhi, Kalpana Singh asks, what is the role of spectrometer?
Yeah, so spectroscopy basically gives you chemistry. So, like I said, is one thing in the moon is important to study the topology, to study where are the craters and the mountains, etc. And the next thing is to find out the chemical composition of the space of the this thing. So, a spectrometer is a device which actually, we can actually study the light which is coming from uh, different chemical elements. Okay, and basically if you get a spectrum of a source, you can actually use that to study the chemistry, because the spectrum is like fingerprints. So you know whether the moon surface has water, or it has sodium, or it has whichever chemical elements. So spectroscopy is a very standard technique used in chemistry as well as in astronomy to study the chemistry of some surface. So so the spectrometer will basically give us the chemistry of the surface. What is it composed of? Because that's what we are interested in. We are looking for not only the water but also material that can be used as rocket fuel if we use it for future exploration. Yeah. Yes.
Ma'am, another question from Devendra Kumar's account from UP. Why only South Pole of Moon was selected for Chandrayaan 3 to land on Moon?
Yeah. So, like I showed you in that picture earlier, the Apollo missions, the American and the Russian missions, they had very well studied the equatorial region, right? That has been quite well studied. And if you see, I showed you the images. The equatorial regions are quite, flat. There's nothing much, no these things. The interesting part about the South Pole was that was the region where Chandrayaan 1 found water. Okay, and not only water, they found a lot of other interesting minerals in that region, which were, and therefore kind of Chandrayaan 1 started the story where people realized that the South Pole is very, very interesting. And therefore it was it's kind of a stepwise exploration. Initially the idea was just to land on the moon, right? Then, as we are exploring the moon, the Chinese have now checked the far side, the other side which we don't see. And now there's the South Pole. The South Pole also we've not seen it earlier, and it's interesting because it has water. So if we are thinking of doing something on the moon, we need water. We need to check the other elements, because this material. If you are going to do some future exploration, you are going to use material from the moon to build or do some things, you know so we need to know what is it made up of, so that we can see what can we do with it, right? We need to know that. So, yeah. So the South Pole is, like I said, it's the next step in exploration. I would say it like that. It's the next step in exploration.
Ma'am, one student very asked one very interesting question. He tries to explain that, ma'am, already it is proven that moon is they studied that moon is a part of Earth. It formed from Earth. So,
Uh-huh.
is there possibilities any alien or any elements, living elements from which is similar to Earth?
Yeah, so see, similar to Earth will not be possible because, like I said, it is a very thin atmosphere. It's almost a non-existent atmosphere. So life like it is on Earth probably cannot survive on the moon, right? And then conditions on the moon are also not. See, the atmosphere actually protects us from various radiations. What we have on the Earth, the atmosphere protects us from X-ray light, ultraviolet light, gamma rays, various things. But in the moon, you don't have such protection, and therefore, life like on Earth is not there. And this that's right. What you said is that it is known that the moon is a part of the Earth. There was an impact on the Earth through which the moon, came out. So, but this happened at such an early stage when the Earth did not have life on it. This is before that. So, uh, but I think the honest answer would be is that we need to explore and see, right? Like that's what we are doing with Mars. Till now, we have not yet found life, but since you didn't find it in your few explorations, that does not answer the question. We don't have a complete this thing. So probably if we explore, we find, but I think chances are bleak. I don't think you're going to find life on the moon. Yeah.
Ma'am, one another interesting question that student asks that we understand that already we got information that moon very much, especially this south pole, has icy form of water. So
Hmm.
the student asks that, is it as per very similar whatever the ice form in our deep freeze, because sometimes if we did not defrost it, then it becomes so thick we have to use hammer also to eliminate those ice. So is it a similar one?
Yeah, see, what happens is on the South Pole, like I said, because you have these craters and you have these big mountains, etc., the shadow regions, yeah, the regions in the shadow, they get a temperature of almost minus 230 degrees centigrade, very, very cold. And therefore, this is frozen like that, even harder, probably, even frozen harder, because some of these regions do not receive any sunlight. They don't receive any sunlight, and therefore, yeah, it would be that kind of this thing. So obviously that's another story, that if we want to use it, how will we use it? That's yet another story. But at present the question is, it does it exist? Yes, it exists. We have evidence of that. Now how much of it is it there, and how will we use it, is another story. That needs to be this thing, yeah, because we can't be hammering. We need to find some way of doing that. So the Russian probe Luna 25, they actually had some radioactive material on them, with which it could heat up. Like I told you, the biggest problem for Chandrayaan 3 is when the lunar day is over. A lunar day is 14 days, and then you'll have night for 14 days, because that's the phases of the moon, right? So because of that, what will happen is that it will just freeze. Chandrayaan 3 also will freeze. So this is a very, very deep freeze. It's not our kind of freezers. It is far colder. Yeah.
Ma'am, another interesting question is there. Um the student, I think he is not understanding why he understand that he said that ISRO are saying that this is the time when on south pole it is dark enough, it is night time. But all the pictures that is released by this ISRO, the pictures showing the moon surface is quite enlightened, like daytime. So how, whether there is night or day? The student asked in such ways, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So, like I told you, that a lunar day is 14 days, right? So if we want to totally use that window, 14-day window, we are going to, tomorrow would be the beginning of day. It would be the beginning of
Yeah,
day so that you get your full 14 days, right? So that's what it, but the thing is, we know that the moon has a very good albedo. Albedo is the reflection, this thing, right? And therefore you can still see, it is visible like that. So the dark parts are not so dark in that sense, because there's a good amount of reflection which is coming from the moon. But yeah, so I can just so if you actually see, yeah, so if you actually see just now, the moon's phase, I was checking that, it is waxing crescent. So it is 28.8% visible, right? So that means there is a good amount of light there, right? So it's a waxing crescent, the moon's phase just now. Yeah. So there is light, like I said, 28.8%. There is light. Yeah. But for that point, the day will start tomorrow. You all aware, right? On the, yeah, yeah. Yes, sir.
so ma'am, the next question we are taking that, ma'am, one student asked that whether that Vikram has four legs, whether all the four legs at a time will do its soft landing process, or one by one leg will touch.
Oh God, I'm sorry, I don't know that. I think all four have to, because if you want to stand, you cannot stand on one leg, right? It is better if you stand on four legs rather than on one leg. So I think logically all four should go down, right? Because what you want to ensure is good balance, right? Because just think of it, if you have a surface and the thing falls, there's nobody there to get it up. So I think all four should go together. I think so.
And those are the questions, so many question, more question, but I think we have time is running, ma'am. Better, it will be better to answer the question. We may enjoy the whole happenings of the good deeds of ISRO on the next evening. That is very specially from 5:20 is also doing its live telecast of all these
Yes,
things, where we may get a maximum success on Earth mission, and it may be one another experiment of ISRO after a failure and success, how a soft landing can be done. And we will be it's a pride moment for all of us when we are going to be one most pioneer generation who can be there on seeing this all these things live. So I think it will be better to see all this action on with the issue, and we'll get all these question, answers of question. So with
yes,
these
I'm
words,
also, yeah.
thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am,
And I
for
also look forward. Please watch the live telecast tomorrow. Let's all be with the country and hopefully enjoy. Thank you very much.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you once
Yeah.
again. We hope after this successful Moon Mission Chandrayaan 3, we need your one another lecture, one another
Yeah.
learning from yours to you, from you, and to listen you from all these happenings in a another form, in a pride form, where we have a feeling of pride, proud moments will be there. And 23rd August we can celebrate. And so thank you, ma'am, thank for being with us,
Yeah.
giving your precious time for learning, and giving your precious time for answering all these questions of the student. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And with these words, we are concluding here. We have to wait for next evening It's our request to all the students, all the teachers, the total nation of India to celebrate those moments with ISRO. Please be with ISRO when ISRO is doing that mission Chandrayaan at its final stage. And with a hope of success, we are concluding here. Thank you. And one another information I would like to share. Please subscribe our this channel youtube.com /user Anjan Writer, where we are doing all these events. We are celebrating the science pride moments of India and issue for to success the mission of ours from our side, the mission of making scientists for future. And all of you who wants some credit with this program, please like, share, and subscribe the channel, and make a comment with your name and email. We will serve the certificate of participation signed by digitally signed by scientists of ISRO, NASA, and other prestigious institutes to you in next month. With these words, once again, good evening to all, and thank you.